The mirrored facade of Holt's strategic group caught the morning sun and threw it back across downtown Atlanta like fire on glass. Inside, 32-year-old communication strategist Naomi Pierce moved through the marble-floored corridors with the calm precision of a woman who had learned to survive on caffeine and deadlines. Her dark brown skin glowed under the soft LED lights, but faint shadows beneath her eyes betrayed how many nights she'd traded sleep for strategy decks. In conference room A, executives waited while slides flickered across a digital wall. Naomi spoke with quiet authority. If we adjust the rollout window by 48 hours, Meridian's engagement rate will stabilize. The room nodded. Her mind didn't. Her heart hammered a rhythm that had nothing to do with marketing data. When the glass doors hissed open, Zion Holt, 38, entered, the billionaire CEO of the company he'd inherited and rebuilt from dust. Broad-shouldered in a smoke-gray suit, skin the shade of polished bronze, eyes a piercing obsidian that never needed to raise his voice to command obedience. The air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. He scanned the room once and stopped on her. "Ms. Pierce," he said, voice low and smooth like velvet sliding across steel. "You've been in this building every night for 3 weeks straight." Naomi straightened her spine. "That's what you pay me for, sir." One brow lifted, a faint, disbelieving smirk touching his lips. "I pay you to deliver brilliance, not exhaustion." He stepped closer until the faint scent of his cologne, oak, amber, something restrained but expensive, curled through her senses. From the folder in his hand, he withdrew a single ivory envelope and placed it in front of her. Inside was a handwritten note, 2 weeks. Sea Island. No arguments. Her eyes flicked up, startled. "You're sending me away?" "I'm giving you back your pulse." His tone softened but never lost authority. "You've earned it, Naomi." Around them, the meeting restarted. Voices resumed, charts clicked forward, but the world between them stayed suspended in quiet electricity. She caught the faintest curve of his mouth, not quite a smile, not quite professional either. When the session ended, people spilled out with murmured congratulations and reminders. Naomi lingered. Zion didn't leave. He leaned against the conference table, sleeves rolled once, the CEO mask cracking just enough to reveal concern. "You look like you're waiting for permission to breathe," he said. "I'm fine," she replied automatically. Fine doesn't twitch at the corner of her mouth every time someone mentions a deadline. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say, "You have no idea how hard I've worked to be fine," but he already seemed to know. "Go," he said gently. "There's a car waiting. Everything's arranged, driver, key, stocked fridge. Just go before I change my mind." He turned away before she could answer, but she saw the ghost of something raw flicker across his face. Worry, guilt, something dangerously close to tenderness. Naomi stood frozen, the note trembling in her hand. For years she'd prided herself on control, but right now it felt like the ground had tilted. By the time the elevator opened to the lobby, she'd convinced herself this was just another assignment. A forced sabbatical, a strategic retreat. Yet when she stepped outside, the humid Georgia air hit her like a reminder of everything human. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tiana Brooks, her assistant. "Boss lady, Mr. Holt just approved 2 weeks off. You okay with that?" Naomi typed back, "Apparently I don't have a choice." She added a winking emoji, but her chest ached. That evening, as the skyline bled gold into violet, Naomi stood before her floor-to-ceiling window. Below, Atlanta pulsed with life. Jazz spilling from rooftop bars, the scent of rain rising off hot pavement, headlights snaking past Piedmont Park. Somewhere in that city, people were laughing, loving, living on schedules that didn't revolve around quarterly reports. She exhaled slowly and touched the envelope again. Sea Island. 2 weeks. A pause she hadn't asked for from a man she could never seem to read. She whispered to her reflection, "Maybe you need this, girl. Maybe you really do." The woman in the glass, poised, polished, tired, offered no argument. As night swallowed the skyline, Naomi packed a small suitcase. Her hand brushed over her company badge before dropping it on the desk. For the first time in years, she let herself leave it behind. She didn't know that the note Zion Holt had written would unravel everything she thought she knew about boundaries, love, and herself. But she could feel it in her bones. Something had just shifted, and there would be no going back. The coastal highway to Sea Island shimmered beneath the late morning sun as Naomi's black range, Rover wound past stretches of salt marsh and bending, oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. The air smelled of sea wind and magnolia, the kind of softness she'd forgotten existed. She told herself this was nothing more than a mandated break, a CEO's way of keeping his overworked strategist from burning out. But the way Zion Holt's voice had sounded when he said "you've earned it" kept replaying like a song she couldn't turn off. The driver, a polite man in a linen shirt, helped unload her suitcase in front of a beach cottage that looked like something out of a dream. Whitewashed wood, wide porch, tall windows that caught the light off the Atlantic. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and ocean salt. On the kitchen counter sat another envelope with her name written in his handwriting. She opened it carefully. "Welcome to quiet, Naomi. Try to remember what it feels like." Underneath was a small brass key and a folded note with directions to the nearest market and cafe. No signature. She ran her finger over the ink and felt an ache she couldn't explain. By afternoon, she had unpacked enough to pretend she belonged there. She stepped out onto the porch barefoot, the warm plank soft under her feet, her curls lifting in the sea breeze. The horizon stretched endlessly, waves crashing in steady rhythm. She sank into the porch swing, watching the water shimmer like molten glass, and realized how rare silence had become in her life. No buzzing phone, no notification pings, no late-night Slack messages marked urgent. Just the whisper of tide and wind. It was terrifying and healing all at once. When evening came, the sky blushed pink and gold, and Naomi sat by the window with a glass of wine. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten dinner without multitasking, yet now she found herself savoring each bite of shrimp and grits as if rediscovering taste itself. Still, her mind drifted back to Zion. His steady voice in meetings, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, that small note of care hidden behind corporate precision. She tried to tell herself she was imagining it, but she wasn't. That night, she dreamed of him standing by the sea, his shirt open, wind tangling through his short curls, his gaze fixed on her like he'd been waiting a lifetime. She woke with her heart racing, the dream still clinging to her skin like humidity. The next morning, she explored the quiet streets of the island town. Locals waved as she passed, and for the first time in years, she waved back. She bought coffee from a corner cafe where the barista called her sweetheart and refused to let her pay for the second cup. "You're Mr. Holt's guest," he said kindly, and she froze for a second before managing a smile. So even here, Zion's shadow lingered. When she returned to the cottage, a woman in her 60s was standing on the porch with a covered dish. Her dark skin glowed in the afternoon light, her eyes kind yet sharp. "You must be Naomi," she said, voice soft but sure. "I'm Mrs. Loretta Patterson from next door. Zion asked me to check on you, make sure you had everything you need." Naomi blinked, touched and a little unnerved. That was thoughtful of him. "Please come in." Over tea and Mrs. Patterson's still warm peach cobbler, Naomi listened as the older woman talked about the island, about community fish fries and porch gossip, about how Zion had bought this place 3 years ago after his father passed. "He was different then," Loretta said, studying her carefully. "Grieving hard, working harder. But lately, when he comes down here, he looks lighter, like something or someone done pulled the weight off his shoulders." Naomi's pulse skipped, but she kept her tone light. "He works a lot. He probably just needed a change of pace." Loretta chuckled knowingly. "Child, men like Zion Holt don't change pace. Something or someone makes them." Naomi smiled, deflecting, but the warmth in her chest refused to leave. After the neighbor left, she wandered the beach until sunset, letting the waves lap at her ankles. The ocean mirrored the same restlessness inside her, steady and untamed. She thought about all the years she'd built walls around herself, walls made of goals, routines, professionalism, and wondered when she'd started mistaking those walls for safety. As darkness crept in, she stood at the water's edge and whispered to no one, "What are you doing to me, Zion Holt?" The night answered only with wind and surf. Inside, the cottage lights flickered softly against the windows. She poured another glass of wine and stared at the note he'd left her on the counter. Try to remember what quiet feels like, but the quiet only made her hear the sound of his voice clearer. By the fourth morning, Naomi had begun to forget what time felt like. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked softly, but the rhythm of the island moved differently, slower, sweeter, measured by waves instead of deadlines. She woke with sunlight spilling across white linen sheets, her body still adjusting to the absence of alarms. The first few days she'd tried to fill the silence with productivity. cleaning, reading, even answering emails she wasn't supposed to. But eventually the stillness began to win. Now her phone sat untouched on the nightstand, face down, notifications silenced. She walked barefoot along the shoreline, her braids brushing against her shoulders, the wind teasing the hem of her sundress. The sand was warm beneath her feet, the water cool and teasing, each wave pulling her farther away from the woman she'd been in Atlanta, the woman who never stopped. By mid-afternoon, she found herself sitting cross-legged on the porch swing, laptop open but forgotten, eyes lost in the horizon. She told herself this was rest, but beneath the calm, something else was stirring, a pulse, an awareness she couldn't name. It had started the night she arrived. Every creak of the old floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the shutters, felt like breath on her skin. The house itself seemed alive, whispering reminders of its owner. The scent of his cologne still lingered faintly in the linen closet. A pair of sunglasses sat forgotten on the kitchen counter, the kind she'd seen him wear to outdoor press events. She should have packed them away, but she didn't. She just kept glancing at them as if they were waiting for him to return. That evening, when the tide receded, Naomi wandered down to the dock and sat with her legs dangling above the water. The air tasted like salt and dusk, crickets singing in the distance. She thought about Zion's hands, the way he adjusted his cufflinks before meetings, the way his voice lowered when he was about to say something he shouldn't. She shook her head quickly, trying to banish the thought, but her heart didn't listen. Back in Atlanta, she'd been admired, respected, even envied, but she'd never been seen. With Zion, she felt exposed in ways that scared her, and she wasn't sure if it was because he looked through her or into her. The following morning, Naomi was in the garden when she saw Mrs. Loretta Patterson again, walking up the path with her straw hat and gentle smile. "Morning, baby," she greeted, holding a plate covered in foil. "Fresh biscuits and honey butter. Figured you might skip breakfast like most of us do when our minds are full." Naomi laughed softly. "You've been spying on me." "No, sugar," Loretta teased. "I just know that look. Woman trying to rest, but her thoughts keep running marathons." They sat on the porch, the older woman pouring sweet tea into mason jars, while Naomi nibbled at a biscuit. Loretta studied her with quiet curiosity. "Zion told me once he bought this house 'cause it was the only place he could hear himself think. That boy been running since he was 16, you know. Always chasing, never still. Until lately. He comes down here now, sits right where you're sitting, just watching the ocean for hours. Sometimes I think he's finally remembering what peace looks like." Naomi hesitated, then asked softly, "Did he ever bring anyone here before?" Loretta shook her head. "Not a soul. You the first woman I ever seen unpack a suitcase in that house." Naomi felt the words settle over her like sunlight and thunder all at once. "Maybe he just trusts me to keep it clean." Loretta chuckled knowingly. "Trust got nothing to do with cleaning, sweetheart." When the woman left, Naomi sat in the silence, Loretta's words echoing in her chest. She looked out at the water, where light danced over the surface, restless and alive. That night, a soft rain began to fall, tapping against the windows like fingertips. Naomi sat on the couch wrapped in a throw blanket, scrolling through photos on her phone. For the first time, she felt the urge to share something personal, something not about work or perfection. She opened her camera, turned it toward the storm outside, and snapped a picture of the darkened beach, the waves illuminated by flashes of lightning. The caption came to her before she could think twice. "Sometimes the storms that shake us most are the ones that help us understand what we're really made of." She posted it, stared at it for a moment, then set the phone aside. For the first time in months, she didn't care how many people saw it. She leaned her head back, listening to the rhythm of rain against glass. Somewhere out there, she imagined Zion seeing the same storm from somewhere else. Maybe his office window high above the city. Maybe he'd think of her. The thought made her chest ache in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. She didn't know that miles away in Atlanta, Zion Holt was staring at his phone, that same post glowing across his screen. The storm in her photo reflected in his eyes, and that before the night was over, it would drive him to do something even he didn't see coming. The rain had turned to a steady downpour by morning, washing the world in silver and sound. Naomi stood at the window of the cottage, coffee mug warm between her palms, watching sheets of water blur the horizon. The storm outside felt like the storm inside her chest, wild, pulsing, impossible to calm. She hadn't slept much. Her mind kept replaying that message she'd posted, wondering if Zion had seen it, wondering if he'd understood the meaning hidden in its calm words. Just as she reached for her phone to check, a flash of headlights swept across the living room. Tires crunched on wet gravel. Her heart jumped. For a moment she hoped it was him. But when the figure stepped out of the car, umbrella snapping open, her breath caught in confusion. Darius Mitchell, tall, clean-cut, dressed in a soaked trench coat, his expression sharp with determination. Her ex. She hadn't seen him in almost a year, not since the day she'd walked away after realizing he loved the idea of her ambition more than the woman herself. She opened the door before he could knock. "Darius, what are you doing here?" He looked her over, rain dripping from his beard. "You weren't answering your phone. Your assistant said you were off the grid, and when I found out you were here alone, I had to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," she said firmly, stepping aside so he wouldn't drip on the rug. "You drove 5 hours from Atlanta because you think I can't handle a vacation?" "You're not the vacation type," he replied with a bitter smile. "I thought maybe something was wrong, and then I saw that post you made." Her pulse quickened. "So you saw it?" "Yeah," he said, setting the umbrella by the door. And all I could think was, who was it for? Naomi stiffened. "It was just a post." "You don't talk like that for no reason, Naomi. You were talking to someone." His eyes narrowed, voice tightening. "Is it Zion Holt?" The name hit the air like thunder. She froze, heartbeat pounding loud enough to drown the rain. "You're being ridiculous, am I?" "Because I know how you look at him. Hell, everyone does. You think people don't notice when the most powerful man in the company can't stop watching his communications director like she's the answer to every question he's ever had?" "Stop!" she snapped, her voice trembling. "You don't get to come here and accuse me of anything." "I'm not accusing you," he said, softer now, stepping closer. "I'm asking you to remember who you were before him. The Naomi who wanted her own firm, her own freedom, not the woman who gets lost chasing a man who'll never be able to love her in daylight." His words cut like glass because they weren't entirely wrong. But the version of her he was describing no longer existed. "You don't know him," she said quietly. "And you don't know me anymore. Then tell me I'm wrong." The challenge hung between them. She opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. Because even in her silence, he saw the truth. "Fine," he said, jaw tight. "But when this blows up in your face, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned, grabbing his umbrella, and stepped back into the storm. "Darius," she started, but the words caught in her throat. He didn't look back. The car door slammed, tires hissed against wet gravel, and just like that he was gone. She stood there trembling, her breath shallow, the echo of his warning ringing in her ears. It wasn't grief she felt, it was clarity, raw and frightening. Because beneath his accusations, he'd said something she couldn't deny. She was in love with Zion Holt, completely, recklessly, dangerously in love, and that truth terrified her more than any storm. She sank onto the couch, still wearing the sweatshirt she'd borrowed from the linen closet, a simple gray thing that smelled faintly of him, and finally let the tears come. Not polite tears, not cinematic ones, the kind that broke through walls and washed everything clean. Outside, the rain beat harder, and for the first time in years, Naomi stopped fighting it. Miles away, in a penthouse high above the city, Zion sat across from his sister, Imani Holt, at their favorite restaurant in Buckhead. The jazz trio played low and slow, but he barely heard it. Imani studied him with the sharp intuition only an older sister could have. "You look terrible," she said, stabbing a piece of salmon with her fork. "You're not eating. You're checking your phone every 5 seconds. Who is she?" He gave a tired half-smile. "Can't a man just have a bad day?" "Not you," she said. "You only get like this when it's about a woman." Zion didn't respond. Imani leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Let me guess. The brilliant strategist you promoted too fast because you couldn't admit you wanted her." He sighed. "It's complicated. It always is. So what are you going to do about it?" He looked down at his phone where Naomi's post still glowed across the screen. The storm she'd captured, the caption beneath it. "Sometimes the storms that shake us most are the ones that help us understand what we're really made of." His chest tightened. "She's out there right now, probably watching that storm from my porch," he murmured. "Then what are you still doing here?" Imani said, exasperated but smiling. "You're supposed to be a genius, Zion, but you're about to let the best thing that ever happened to you slip away because you're scared." He hesitated only a second before pushing his chair back. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he told her. I'm going to see Island. Finally, she breathed, watching him stride toward the door, with that same relentless energy that had built empires, and was now being redirected toward something far more dangerous. The storm had not yet passed when Naomi heard the distant rumble of an engine cutting through the sound of rain. She froze, heart pounding, the echo of Darius's departure still raw in her chest. Through the blur of the window, headlights approached fast along the narrow drive, then stopped sharply outside the cottage. The door burst open before she could move. Standing there, drenched and breathing hard, was Zion Holt. His white dress shirt clung to his chest, soaked through from the rain, tie gone, dark curls wet and disheveled. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. "You drove here?" she whispered, disbelief softening her voice. He leaned against the doorframe as if he'd run the whole way. "I saw your post." She blinked, startled. "What, my post?" "The storm," he said quietly, his voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper. "I thought I needed to make sure you were okay." "You drove 5 hours because of an Instagram post?" she asked, her lips curving despite the tremor in her hands. "I've been looking for an excuse to come here since the moment you left Atlanta," he admitted, his usual composure unraveling with each word. "Actually, that's not true. I've been looking for an excuse to tell you the truth for months." Naomi's breath caught. He stepped closer, the space between them electric, his eyes darker than the sky outside. "Zion," she whispered. "What truth?" He exhaled shakily, his control fracturing. "That I'm completely unprofessional. That I think about you during meetings. That I remember exactly what you were wearing the first day you walked into my office. A navy dress with silver buttons. You were nervous, but you tried not to show it." Her throat tightened as his words poured out raw and unstoppable. "That I started rearranging my schedule just to see you. That I bought coffee from 12 different cafes until I found the one that makes it exactly the way you like it. Black with honey. That every time you walk into a room I forget what I was about to say." He closed his eyes briefly, rain dripping from his hair. "That I'm in love with you, Naomi. Completely, irrationally, destructively in love with you." The room went still except for the thunder outside and the sound of her heartbeat. Naomi stared at him. The most powerful man she'd ever known suddenly stripped bare, vulnerable in a way she'd never imagined. "You can't mean that," she whispered. "You don't do this. You don't feel like this." "I didn't," he said, voice low and hoarse. "Until you." She stood frozen, torn between disbelief and the rush of everything she'd been holding back. Then she said quietly, "Darius was here today." His jaw tensed, the faintest flicker of jealousy crossing his face. "I see. He proposed." Zion went still. "Congratulations," he said, his tone perfectly neutral, but she heard the pain beneath it. "I said no." The words hung heavy in the air, and she saw hope flare behind his eyes, fragile but real. "Why?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Naomi took a small step forward, then another, until she was close enough to see the faint gold flecks in his dark eyes. "Because I'm in love with someone else," she said softly, her hand trembling as she reached up to touch his face. "Someone who sees me. Someone who challenges me and makes me feel alive. Someone who scares me because he makes me want more than I ever let myself want." His breath caught as her fingers brushed his jaw, and for the first time since she'd known him, Zion looked completely undone. His hand came up, covering hers, his skin warm even through the chill of the storm. "Say it," he whispered, voice breaking. "Say it's me. It's you," she breathed. That was all it took. He kissed her. Not tentative, not polite. Hungry, desperate. The kind of kiss that carried every sleepless night and every unspoken word between them. Naomi melted against him, the taste of rain and salt and heat flooding her senses. His hands framed her face, her back, her waist like he was trying to memorize her. When they finally broke apart, both of them trembling, he rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice rough. "But if I hadn't, I'd never have known what this feels like." She smiled through the tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Then maybe you were meant to." He brushed his thumb across her cheek, eyes soft now. "I don't know what happens next. The board, the company, the rumors, it'll all come down on us." "Then let it," she whispered. "Let the world fall apart. I'm done pretending." The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling farther out to sea. They stood there in the quiet aftermath, two people who had spent years building walls now standing in the ruins, unguarded and finally free. Later, When the rain stopped completely, they lay tangled beneath the sheets, the air between them warm and slow. Naomi traced lazy circles on his chest while he whispered against her hair, "I don't deserve you." "Maybe not," she murmured with a tired smile, "but I'm giving you the chance anyway." And as the first light of morning touched the room, neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. The silence spoke for them. Dawn crept in pale and quiet. Naomi woke tangled in the sheets, her head on Zion's chest, the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing anchoring her in a world that still felt too good to be real. The storm had moved on, leaving the air damp and soft, sunlight pooling across his brown skin like melted gold. For a few stolen minutes, she let herself simply look at him. The strong lines of his face relaxed in sleep, the faint stubble along his jaw, the hand resting possessively at her waist. It was the kind of morning she'd never allowed herself to imagine. She traced a finger along his collarbone. He stirred, eyes opening slowly. "Good morning," he murmured, voice low and rough from sleep. She smiled. "Morning." He kissed her once, lazy and tender, then pressed his forehead against hers. "I could stay like this forever," he said. But even as he said it, his phone began to buzz on the nightstand. The sound sliced through the stillness. He groaned, reached for it, saw the caller ID, and the warmth in his eyes vanished. "Marcus," he muttered, answering. Naomi could hear the tension in his voice before she even heard the words. "What do you mean Meridian's threatening to walk?" "Who leaked the proposal?" "No, don't say anything to the board until I get there." He ended the call, already sitting up, mind spinning back into CEO mode. Naomi clutched the sheet to her chest, watching the transformation, her lover dissolving into the man who commanded entire markets. "What happened?" she asked quietly. He buttoned his shirt with shaking hands. "An internal leak. If Meridian pulls their account, we lose 8 figures. I have to fix this before it spreads." She nodded, forcing steadiness she didn't feel. "Of course you do." He paused halfway through tying his shoes, looking at her as if he wanted to memorize her face. "I don't want to leave like this." "Then don't," she whispered, though they both knew he had to. Zion stood, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her hard. One last promise crammed into seconds. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "Be careful," she replied. He hesitated in the doorway, raincoat in hand, eyes dark with conflict. Then the door closed and the sound of his engine faded down the long drive. The silence that followed was brutal. Naomi sat motionless for a long time, staring at the dent his head had left in the pillow. It already smelled less like him. She rose finally, wrapped herself in his shirt, and walked to the window. The sea was calm now, as if pretending nothing had ever happened. She thought of what he'd said the night before, that he didn't deserve her, and wondered if that had been his way of warning her. Hours later, she packed her bag with mechanical precision, left the key on the counter, and locked the door behind her. As she drove away from Sea Island, she whispered, "You can't love a man like Zion Holt halfway. He'll always belong to the storm." Back in Atlanta, the city glittered under harsh afternoon sun. Zion stepped out of his car straight into chaos. Board members waiting, legal teams calling, Marcus pacing with a stack of files. He gave orders with surgical precision, burying emotion under discipline. But every time someone said Naomi, his focus slipped. When night fell and the office emptied, he sat alone in his glass-walled corner, staring at the ocean on his phone's wallpaper. He thought of her laughing on that porch swing, bare feet in sunlight, the sound of her voice saying, "Let the world fall apart." For the first time, he wasn't sure he could hold both, the empire he'd built and the woman who made him feel human. He closed his eyes, whispering to the empty room, "Don't give up on me yet." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt longer than it ever had before. Each floor that ticked past was another layer of armor sliding into place. Naomi had spent 2 weeks practicing this moment, how to see Zion again without her face betraying everything that had happened between them. She stepped out into the sleek hum of Holt Strategic Group's headquarters, heels clicking on marble, expression calm and unreadable. Her assistant, Tiana Brooks, rushed to greet her. "Thank God you're back. The Morrison campaign nearly imploded, Meridian's still unstable, and Mr. Holt has been..." "Different," Naomi arched a brow. "Different how?" Tiana leaned in. "He's been asking about your return date every day. Reviewed your schedule himself 3 times. For someone who usually delegates, he's suddenly very hands-on." Naomi's heart clenched, but she managed a cool smile. "Well, that's the job." Her phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Executive strategy meeting, 10 a.m., conference room A, 15 minutes. 15 minutes until she saw him again. She spent those minutes reviewing reports, rehearsing composure. When she finally walked into the glass-walled room, every word she'd practiced vanished. Zion was standing at the head of the table, immaculate in a tailored navy suit, his expression composed. But when his eyes met hers, his mask slipped for half a heartbeat, enough for her to see the warmth, the longing, the relief before professionalism swallowed it whole. "Ms. Pierce," he said evenly. "Mr. Holt." Her voice didn't shake, though her pulse did. The meeting began. Numbers, projections, contingency plans filled the air. But between every line of dialogue was a conversation only they could hear. When their hands brushed as she passed him a file, the jolt was instantaneous. She didn't look up, but she felt his attention burning against her skin. Afterwards, the team dispersed, leaving only the two of them in the echoing silence of the conference room. Zion set his tablet down slowly. "How was Sea Island?" "Restful," she said. "Until the storm." He smiled faintly. "I heard," she lifted her chin. "You should probably be more careful whose posts you stalk, Mr. Holt." He took a step closer. "You should probably be more careful what you post, Ms. Pierce." They both laughed softly, but the sound carried too much history. He exhaled. "Naomi, the door opened." Marcus King, CFO, stuck his head in. "Zion, the board's asking for an update on Meridian." The spell broke. Zion's tone snapped back to business. "I'll be right there." Marcus disappeared, and for a long second neither of them spoke. Finally, Naomi said quietly, "You should go." Zion hesitated, jaw tight. "This isn't over." "It never is," she replied. When he was gone, she leaned against the table, eyes closed, pulse unsteady. She'd survived the first meeting, but she could already feel the weight of what came next. Outside the glass wall, Atlanta's skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun, hard, bright, and merciless. Somewhere in that maze of power and reputation, a secret love was already becoming a ticking bomb. The skyline burned gold outside the penthouse windows, the kind of sunset that made Atlanta look like it was built out of fire and glass. Naomi stood in the elevator, clutching the small clutch purse she hadn't used since college, telling herself this was just business. But when the door slid open to reveal Zion's home, sleek wood, dim lighting, the faint hum of jazz, she knew she'd been lying. He turned from the kitchen, sleeves rolled, apron tied loosely around his waist. The sight of him cooking in his own penthouse hit her harder than any boardroom stare. "You cook?" she asked. "I try," he said, smiling. "And tonight I needed the distraction." The dining table overlooked the glittering city, candles flickering between them. The smell of grilled salmon and rosemary filled the air. They ate slowly, the quiet, comfortable but charged conversation slipping between business and everything else. "You've been distant," she said finally, "trying not to ruin what I can't stop wanting. Zion." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Naomi, when I left Sea Island, I thought I was choosing responsibility. But all I did was choose fear." Her chest tightened. "You can't afford to be reckless," he gave a humorless laugh. "That's the thing, I've been careful my entire life. And now the board is tearing me apart anyway." She frowned. "What happened?" "Someone leaked our Meridian strategy deck. The timing's too perfect. While I was gone, someone was watching. I think they know about us." The words hung like smoke. She set her fork down. "Do you think they'll use it?" "They always do," he said quietly. "In this world, a woman like you, brilliant, ambitious, black, falls for her boss and they won't call it love. They'll call it leverage." She swallowed hard, anger and fear twisting together. "Then we'll make sure they never have proof." He rose, came around the table, and pulled her gently to her feet. "Naomi, I don't care who finds out anymore." She met his gaze. "You should." He shook his head. "I'd rather lose the company than lose you." Her voice broke into a whisper. "Don't say things like that," he touched her cheek. "I mean them." Outside, lightning flashed far away, storm clouds building again beyond the skyline. The first drops of rain spattered the glass as he kissed her, slow and certain. When they pulled apart, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't before. Resolve. Not just desire. They stood there as the city lights blinked alive, reflections of a world they both ruled by day and defied by night. For a few stolen hours, the rest of it, the board, the rumors, the fear, ceased to exist. By the time dawn rolled over Atlanta, everything had changed again. The headlines came first. Whispers across industry blogs about internal instability at Holt Strategic Group. Then the calls started. By mid-morning, Zion's office was a war zone of advisors and attorneys, every voice trying to outshout the others. Naomi sat across the hall in her own glass cubicle, watching through the blinds as chaos rippled through the empire they had both built. Every few minutes her phone buzzed with messages she didn't answer. They know. Board meeting at noon. Prepare a statement. At 11:45, Marcus appeared at her door, his face drawn. Naomi, the board wants you in there. Her blood went cold. Why? Because they think you're part of the problem, he said gently. I told them you're not, but you should be ready. She straightened her blazer, heart pounding. Then let's not keep them waiting. The boardroom was ice. 12 directors, all power suits and cold eyes, seated around the long table like judges. Zion was already there, standing at the head, jaw tight, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't look at her as she entered, but she felt him, the tension between them vibrating through the air. Ms. Pierce, said Victoria Blackstone, the board chair, her voice like silk over steel. Thank you for joining us. We've been made aware of a potential conflict of interest between yourself and Mr. Holt. Naomi met her gaze squarely. There's no conflict that affects my work, ma'am. Perhaps, Victoria said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a photo, blurry but damning, Naomi on the porch at Sea Island wearing one of Zion's shirts. Her breath caught. Where did you get this? Victoria smiled faintly. Social media is a fascinating thing, Ms. Pierce. Even deleted posts have a way of resurfacing. Zion's voice cut through the silence. This is out of line. It's necessary, Victoria replied. If the Meridian account collapses because of executive misconduct, shareholders will demand accountability. Both of you could cost this company millions. Naomi forced her chin higher. I did my job. I always have. Victoria's expression softened just enough to make it worse. No one's questioning your talent, dear. But perception is power, and right now the perception is that you've compromised the CEO. The room went quiet. Naomi felt every heartbeat echo in her ears. Zion stepped forward. If you're looking for someone to blame, blame me. I asked her to Sea Island. I wrote that note. If there's a consequence, it's mine. Victoria studied him for a long, unreadable moment. Noble, she said finally. But naive. The board will review your conduct, Mr. Holt. Until then, we expect transparency. Both of you. The meeting ended with polite handshakes that felt like threats. Naomi walked out first, head high, pulse trembling. She didn't stop until she reached the corridor's end, where the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The view swam before her eyes. Zion caught up to her a minute later. Naomi, don't, she said softly. Not here, he lowered his voice. They can't control what we feel. Maybe not, she whispered, but they can destroy everything else. He reached for her hand. I won't let them. She pulled away, eyes bright with tears. You can't fight an empire with feelings. Zion. And then she walked away, leaving him alone in the glass corridor, the city's reflection slicing his silhouette into a dozen fractured versions of himself. The man who built everything, and the man who might lose it all for love. By the next afternoon, the air inside Holt's strategic group felt heavy, charged, like everyone was waiting for the building itself to make a decision. Naomi worked through the morning in silence, pretending not to feel the stares following her through every hallway. Her inbox overflowed with meeting requests she ignored. She kept her head down and her voice calm, but her chest ached like something was splintering inside. When the message came from Victoria Blackstone's office, she already knew it wasn't optional. Ms. Pierce, Ms. Blackstone would like a word, said the assistant outside the conference suite. Naomi smoothed her blazer, straightened her posture, and stepped inside. The door shut behind her with a soft click that sounded too final. Victoria sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, elegant as ever in a cream suit, her silver curls catching the afternoon light. Naomi, she said warmly, gesturing toward the seat across from her. You've had quite the week. Naomi sat, hands folded, face neutral. If this is about the Meridian account, I've already spoken with the legal team. Victoria's smile didn't falter. This isn't about Meridian. This is about your future. She opened a slim folder and slid it across the glass table. Inside was a letter printed on the embossed stationery of Blackstone and Reed Consulting, the most prestigious communications firm in the country. Naomi blinked. I don't understand. Victoria leaned forward, voice smooth as honey and sharp as a blade. It's an offer, dear. Partner Trek, 6 figures, immediate relocation package, your own team. You'd be the youngest senior consultant we've ever hired. Naomi's eyes flicked from the page to Victoria's face. Why? Because you're brilliant, Victoria said simply. And because staying here will destroy you. She clasped her hands neatly. Zion Holt is about to become a liability. The board is already preparing a motion of review. When it passes, he'll be stripped of authority and you'll be collateral damage. Naomi's pulse quickened. You're offering me a bribe. I'm offering you protection. Victoria's tone never rose. You think this is about romance, about 2 people who happen to fall in love? It's not. It's about optics, shareholders, and power. You may think you can weather this storm with him, but you can't. The narrative's already written, and it doesn't end kindly for women like us. Naomi's throat tightened. So what are you asking me to do? Victoria's smile widened, but her eyes were steel. Leave him. Publicly, quietly, whichever way you prefer. Tell the press you're moving on to new opportunities. Let the story die. If you do that, this offer is yours. If you don't, she let the pause hang, perfectly measured. You'll be out of a job and no firm will touch you. Naomi sat frozen, every breath heavy. You want me to betray him? I want you to save yourself, Victoria said softly. Men like Zion survive scandals. Women like you become the scandal. Naomi rose slowly, the folder still on the table. I earned everything I have. I won't let you turn me into a cautionary tale. Victoria looked up at her, amused. Then be careful, Miss Pierce. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. Naomi turned toward the door. I've survived harder things than falling. Not from this height, Victoria murmured. Naomi didn't look back. She walked out of that glass room, heels clicking steady and sharp, heart pounding. The city stretched before her through the windows, bright, ruthless, alive. She pressed her palm to the elevator wall as the doors slid shut, her reflection fractured in the mirrored steel. She could still hear Zion's voice from the night at Sea Island. Let the world fall apart. The elevator dropped toward the lobby. Outside, thunder rolled again somewhere far off over Atlanta, low and warning, the sound of another storm building on the horizon, and Naomi Pierce smiled. Just barely, as if she'd finally made peace with what she was about to do next.